Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Overwatch League Season 2 fan thoughts and analysis video. Week 2 is now in the books. Week 3 is coming up. And once again, of course, I am giving you my thoughts on both. So I want to start, of course, with Week 2. Before I get into Week 2, I want to bring up one little thing that took place this week, which is a change to a roster because the Florida Mayhem have added another player, and that player is McGravy, who is a DPS slash flex player. He's got some Tracer, some D.Va, some Zarya, some Roadhog. He's very kind of diverse hero pool, if you want to say. That's what I'm looking for. So that's what we got with him. Now on the Florida Mayhem. So that's the only real big thing. There's another thing that I'll touch on, but I'll touch on that a little bit later. But let's jump into Week 2 and how I did. And I did pretty poorly. 7-9 on the week. And I learned that no one knows anything in this season. I was 1-3 on my big pick games, so that was good. And I also totally forgot on this image, and I'm very sorry, to move my cursor off of the Houston Outlaws Hangzhou Spark game, so I apologize for that. But as you should have been seeing these images, of course, we can see on Thursday, London Spitfire took out the Washington Justice. Florida Mayhem took out the Philadelphia Fusion. That one I got wrong. The Guangzhou Charge took out the Dallas Fuel, which I also got wrong, and the Seoul Dynasty took out the Chengdu Hunters. So it's 2-2 on Thursday. The Fuel are a very weird team. We'll touch on them a little bit later, of course, when we talk about their second game of the week. But I just don't understand what's going on with the Fuel, man. They're very up and down. They win some, they lose some. The Charge are another team that are pretty surprising in a lot of regards. So very interesting game. Between those two. Very one-sided, which I did not expect from that game, but it is what it is. Friday, the Atlanta Reign took down the Toronto Defiant, and the New York Excelsior took out the LA Valiant. Those are the two games I got right from then. My big pick was the New York Excelsior game, so I got that one right. That one was a really good game. That's one of my games of the week, one of the best games of the week. It was really, really competitive. It almost didn't go the New York Excelsior's way, but they ended up pulling it out pretty miraculously. So that was a good game. If you didn't see that one, I'd recommend that one. There's a couple other ones I would recommend, but that's one of the ones that I would say you should definitely check out. Then, of course, the Shanghai Dragons finally got their first win, and it came against the Boston Uprising. And unfortunately, I have to say, there's a bit of controversy surrounding that win. And I want to take nothing away from the Shanghai Dragons. I think the Shanghai Dragons played incredibly well, and I genuinely think they would have won that game even if Fusions were playing. This does have to do with Fusions, unfortunately. If you are aware, Fusions was on a two-way contract with the Boston Uprising, which meant that you could not play more than 2 games in the Overwatch League in order to maintain that two-way player status. So when they traded Gamsu to the Shanghai Dragons, they took Fusions off of that two-way contract. At least they believed they did, and they just thought that they were good. Apparently they were not. And apparently the way the contract works is it's not only if you play in 2 games in the Overwatch League, you can no longer play in Contenders. It's also if you played in Contenders, you can't play any more than 2 games in the Overwatch League. And he played the first 2 games of the season for Boston, and they didn't know that Fusions couldn't play till like an hour or 2 before the game. And obviously it was a problem, and I think I assume the league will clear things up and will figure it out. And I'm sure the Uprising will do whatever they need to do to fix that, because I think it was pretty noticeable that the team was not where they should have been. Even with Color Hex returning, there were some issues there. So yes, congratulations to the Shanghai Dragons. I think they played exceptionally well. I think they outplayed the Boston Uprising in every way. If you didn't see my last video, I'll link it in the description and the cards, but I made a little edit from when the Shanghai Dragons won that you should check out, but that is what it is. But the final game from Friday was the Houston Outlaws taking out the Hangzhou Spark, which I also did not expect. That completely took me by surprise. I thought the Houston Outlaws were pretty much doomed for the rest of the season, and they got the win that they so desperately needed. And the Hangzhou Spark, who were looking like a very dominant force in the league, walked away with a loss. As we move on to Saturday, I didn't really get to watch the first two games. I watched some of the Fusion versus the Fuel, which I was surprised that the Fuel won that game too, because I thought the Fusion were really good. I don't think the Fusion's losses to both the Mayhem and the Fuel come down purely to Boombox being out. I think Boombox is the weakest player on the team when he is playing. I just think that they got outplayed. I kind of think they should play a little bit of Fraggy, but I also think Sato's a really good main tank, so I don't really know. But I think if you're not winning, maybe you should just at least try it, but I don't coach, so that is what it is. But the Paris Eternal walked away with a win against the LA Gladiators. The Eternal looking very good in this GOATS meta, which you would expect from a European roster, as GOATS is a very European-centric meta, and it's very, very popular in Europe, and Europe are very good at it. So the Eternal are looking very good right now. They have a matchup with the Titans week 4 that I'm really excited for. So we'll get to that, though, next week. Of course, the Vancouver Titans played the Guangzhou Charge and beat them, and the Chengdu Hunters beat the Florida Mayhem. So another 2-2 day, and then we get to the downfall. Sunday, London Spitfire looked very dominant against the Hangzhou Spark. It wasn't even close, that game. Hangzhou managed to take a map at the end, but Gesture said they were throwing, so at the very last map, they just kind of, I guess, were like on a high from the win. They were like, yes! So, yeah, that didn't go the way I expected, but the London Spitfire are back, baby! They got 2 wins in 1 week! They're doing well. They're doing well. I'm thinking that they might have a chance to do pretty well as the season progresses. Now I think they figured out what their issues were. I think Guard is doing better than what Birdring was doing. I think Guard has kind of played better. Prophet on the Zarya is better. While he's very good on the Brig, I think him being on Zarya is an improvement to what Birdring was doing. The New York Excelsior took out the Houston Outlaws. The only game I got right on Sunday. My boys with the 4-0. Let's get it. Toronto Defiant took down the LA Valiant, which very much surprised me. I did not see that coming. The Toronto Defiant are becoming one of the dominant teams in the Atlantic, and they're not even at full strength yet. Neko comes back for their next game, and so I'll talk about that when we get to that. But I'm really liking the Toronto Defiant and the way they've been playing. I was kind of right about them being a good team. The final game of the week was between the Vancouver Titans and the San Francisco Shock, and while the score looked very one-sided, it was a very close game. San Francisco Shock losing 3-1, but it was a very, very close game. The Vancouver Titans look to be quite possibly the best team in this meta. The Eternal and the Excelsior are also very, very good, and I think that the Titans haven't really had much of a challenge. The Shock were definitely their biggest challenge. The Charge kind of gave them a run for their money, but I think we need to see the Titans play one of those big juggernaut teams, an Excelsior or a Paris Eternal. So that is my Week 2 stuff. Let's take a looky at my Week 3 picks. So, starting on Thursday, the first game is the Washington Justice against the Philadelphia Fusion. I am 100% taking the Fusion. Even though they had a bit of a skid this week, they have always been inconsistent, and I still think they're a better team, so I'm taking them. Seoul Dynasty over the Boston Uprising. I still think Seoul's a really good team, while I think Boston is still better than what they seemed. If Fusions can't play, then I really don't know how Boston will do, so taking Seoul in that one. Charge against the Mayhem. The Charge look to actually be one of the teams that is surprisingly good and better than I expected them to be. So I got to take them in this game. And in my big pick for Thursday, I got the San Francisco Shock taking on Hangzhou Spark. Two teams that are kind of in a bit of a skid right now. Shock started with a very dominant victory week one, but their very first match, but then lost another game in week one, lost the final game in week two, and a bit of a skid, but they still been playing very well. The Spark have also been on a skid. They started 2-0, now they're 2-2. I like both of these teams. I just think the Shock have more talent, and I think they have looked better even when they've lost. So that is why I'm taking the Shock in my big pick for Thursday. On Friday, we open up with the big pick game. The London Spitfire taking on the LA Gladiators. The Gladiators are lucky because that is the first game that Decay will be eligible to play, which I think will help out this team a lot. I think they've had some issues on the DPS, and I think that they could definitely use a little bit of a boost to that DPS play, but I really like the way London played in week two. They were very good. I mean, Washington, they reverse swept Washington, and you say, oh, Washington's not that great. Nice going, London. You reverse swept a team that's not that good. But their win against the Hangzhou Spark was dominant. They looked significantly better than that team did throughout that game. I really like what London has been doing with guard instead of birdering. I think guard makes the team work a little bit better. He gives them more flexibility because he can play that Sombra, and it opens up, I think, that team's anti-goats play a little bit better. So I really like the Spitfire. I think Decay in his first game, not going to be quite ready yet, so I'm taking the Spitfire. Next, we have the Toronto Defiant taking on New York Excelsior. That will be Neko's first game back from his suspension. But I still think the Excelsior are going to win because they're the New York Excelsior and they are the best team in the league by record right now. And they've been very dominant, and especially against Houston. But they've if they overcame the Valiant, and they overcame some of these other teams, I think they can beat the Defiant. I think it'll be a close game because I think the Defiant are good, but I'm going to take the Excelsior. The Vancouver Titans against the LA Valiant. Vancouver Titans have been very good. I can't really pick against them right now. So, yeah, the Valiant have been really struggling. They've been skidding. I don't know if it's a struggle or if this meta just isn't very good for them, if the roster's not very good. But Titans, I think, win that one pretty easily. Shanghai Dragons against the Chengdu Hunters. I'm taking the Dragons. 2 wins, back-to-back, the longest winning streak yet they will experience, yet I think they're just a better-looking team than the Chengdu Hunters are. Chengdu Hunters are a weird team. They play a really weird style of Overwatch, and I think I think it only works for so long before teams start to figure it out. So I like the Shanghai Dragons, I like what they have, and I'm going to take them to win. So that's all the Friday games. Saturday, we open up with the Paris Eternal against the Atlanta Reign. That is my big pick for Saturday. I'm taking the Paris Eternal. I think they are just very good in this meta. It's going to be their third game in 3 weeks. So they have a very, very easy early schedule, and then they play 4 in the last 2 weeks. So they don't get a week off, but they at least get to spend the earlier parts of the season where I think it's a little bit more about adjusting in a much better position. It's also the Reign's only game of the week. I like the Reign a lot. I think they're a good team, but the Eternal are just very good in this meta, so I'm taking them. The Houston Outlaws take on the Florida Mayhem. I'm taking the Houston Outlaws. They got to win. They got the one win they really needed. I think this is the game where they can start to build on that win. Obviously, they played New York. They lost pretty handily, but New York just looked that much better than them at every turn. And I think it was a lot more about New York than Houston in that game. So I think this is a very big game for Houston. I think they should win it. I thought they should win their first 2 games, and they didn't. But I genuinely think this time around, the Houston Outlaws look like the better team than the Mayhem. Even though they're sitting at the bottom of the rankings of their division, it's not. I don't really think they should be based on the way things work, but the Overwatch League website said that they are, so that's where I put them. But I like the Houston Outlaws more than I like the Mayhem. Comes down to that. Next team, Our next game is the San Francisco Shock against the Washington Justice. Taking the Shock. The Justice just look bad. They have not looked very good, and I got to take the team that I think looks overall better in the Shock. So rolling with them. Finally, we have the Shanghai Dragons against the Dallas Fuel. Well, the Dallas Fuel have been very up and down and up and down and up and down. Sorry about hitting the mic. Getting 4-0'd, winning 3-1, I think it was, and then getting 4-0'd again, and then winning 2-1. They're very up and down. They're very, very inconsistent, but I think at the end of the day, they get the win against Shanghai. Shanghai plays 2 games in 2 days. It's a little tough, so I'm taking the Fuel. Finally, move on to Sunday. The Toronto Defiant take on the Boston Uprising. Neko against his former team. We saw it happen when Gamsu played his former team. Now it's Neko against his former team. I think the Toronto Defiant are just better right now. I think they look better. I'm taking the Defiant to get the win there. The Gladiators taking on the Spark. This is a really tough one for me to pick because I think both of these teams are in kind of similar positions, but now you have the Gladiators with Decay, who I think is a very game-changing type of player. He's a really good player. He was the main reason why they went after Roar, was so they could get Roar and Decay. I think the Gladiators have the edge here. They have that experience. They have that new piece with Decay, so I like the Gladiators to win this one. We have the LA Valiant against the Guangzhou Charge. Another really tough one for me to pick this week, because the Charge I think are a really good team. The Valiant I thought were a good team, but they've really been struggling and they haven't been able to get many wins. And by many I mean any. They're one of 2 winless teams. I think this is kind of the make or break game for them. The Titans is a really hard opponent. They're gonna, I think, go into this game at 0-4. I don't think they're gonna make stage playoffs, but that's not what you're playing for. You're playing for the end of the season. This, to me, is the Valiant's biggest game of the season if they don't beat the Titans. Because if you start 0-5, I mean, you can make playoffs, but it's very hard. It's just a big game for them. They need to prove what they can do. They need to show what they can do. And I think that it's a game that they need to come out and win. And I think they can. I think they're a stronger team in general than the Guangzhou Charge. I just think they're not really playing the best right now. And that's what's kind of hurting them. Final game of the week is my big pick game for Sunday, and that is the New York Excelsior against the Seoul Dynasty. I think that'll be the game of the week. I really like what Seoul has done. I really like what the Excelsior have done this season. I have the NYXL winning. I think they're the better team. They have shown to be, or they've looked to be the better team. They have the better record, the better differential. They've played not the toughest opponents, but I think that this is kind of the NYXL's first big test. I think the Defiant are a good test. The Dynasty are a good test to see where the NYXL are and how they're looking. I think they win this game. I just right now don't really see how you can pick against them until they play a Titans or an Eternal, who I don't think they play either of those in this meta. Actually, I know they don't play either of those in this meta because they play, I want to say, San Francisco to end their stage. So they don't play any of the really big teams. I think we'll see them, of course, in playoffs for this stage. But those are my picks. That is everyone I got for you. Real quick, let's look at the standings for both divisions, and then I'll look at the top 10 overall. So here we have the Atlantic and Pacific standings. No surprises, of course, New York and Vancouver at the top. They have the 2 best records in the league. You have the Eternal right below the Excelsior. They've only played 2 games, so they've only been able to win 2 games, but I think they look good as well. The surprise for me right now, you got the Defiant and the Reign very high up there, above the Fusion, above the Spitfire. Obviously not surprising that they're above the Spitfire looking at week 1, but I wouldn't have expected them to be above the Fusion and the Spitfire, or even the Eternal. I wouldn't expect the Eternal to be up that high when the season started, but here we are. In the Pacific, definitely did not expect the Hunters and the Spark and the Fuel and the Charge to all be above the Valiant and the Gladiators and the Shock. It's a very interesting look. Obviously, it's early in the season. This doesn't really mean a lot yet. Um, it's a very unimportant thing right now, but it's interesting to look at. So those are the standings right now. Here are your top 10 stage standings. Of course, the top 8 teams in each stage make the stage playoffs. So the Excelsior, the Titans, the Eternal, the Reign, the Dynasty, Defiant, Hunters, and Fusion, with the Spitfire and the Spark just on the outside. So those are your standings. Those are my picks. That is my analysis from week 2. And that's all I got for you. So if you enjoyed this video, you want more like it, or whatever, any other types of Overwatch content, consider liking and subscribing. It helps out a lot if I see people like what I'm making. Like I said, check out my video from the Shanghai Dragons victory. I think it's funny. I think it's entertaining. So that is what it is. Let me know down below your thoughts on week 2, who you have winning week 3, if you were also not great with picks, and in general, just how your life is. But that's everything. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all in the next video. And until then, bye-bye.